Welcome everyone. Sam Leary here. Today I am talking about the top 4 ways that UX writing helps businesses make money. So for those that don't know, again, my name is Sam Leary and I make videos for folks who are interested in learning how to leverage writing, specifically UX writing, to increase their personal, professional, and entrepreneurial opportunities. Specifically, I make videos for folks with a background in the humanities who might not feel like they're prepared to navigate professional or entrepreneurial spaces. That was my experience. I studied creative writing in undergrad, and I'm now a small business owner, and I feel like I've learned a lot, and I want to communicate that information to you. So today, we are talking about UX writing, which is the most in-demand writing skill in the market right now for reasons that we will discuss shortly. A quick overview of today's video. I'm going to be discussing an overview in the next slide in greater detail, but it's really going to be segmented, this video, into an introduction to writing for user experience, how it helps businesses. Then we're really going to dig in, talk about how UX writing helps businesses grow, and then 5 key principles of UX writing, as well as examples. I spoke about the most important key writing principles in my last video, but I'm going to revisit them today along with new examples. So without further ado, let's dive in. So an overview, I want to start with a quote. Character is plot, and plot is character. This is an F. Scott Fitzgerald quote. For folks that don't know, F. Scott Fitzgerald was a Nepo baby in a long line of Francis Scotts, all the way back to Francis Scott Key. So that's a joke. Hopefully we don't have anybody who wants to fight me because I, called F. Scott Fitzgerald a Nepo baby. But he is. And I chose this quote because character is plot. Plot is character. This is a fiction quote, but it applies to UX writing. Why? Because plot is, it's structure. Plot is information architecture. And it's information architecture in fiction. And we can learn something from that, and it can inform our business decisions. So again, when I say that I try to help folks with a background in the humanities bridge the gap between, the humanities in academia and the professional and entrepreneurial world, this is what I'm talking about, trying to draw on examples, bring them in, and again, kind of connect the dots for you. So you'll notice here, this is my free UX writing guide. You can visit my website, samleary.com. I invite you to join my e-newsletter and sign up. So you'll get this sent to you. It's like 14 or 15 pages right now, and it's going to continue to grow the more I discuss UX writing. So let's do a quick run through and then jump to the next slide. So I'm going to talk about a lesson plan, about what you can expect from this video. Then we'll talk about how UX writing helps businesses grow. Then we're going to really dig into each one of the 4 ways that I understand or have experienced the fact that UX writing does help businesses grow. So it improves user experience, it enhances brand voice and identity, it drives conversions, and it lowers support costs. So we're going to talk about support costs because they are important in justifying why UX writing is so valuable. And then we're also going to talk about 5 key principles. So let's hop to the next slide. If this is helpful in any way, I invite you to like, comment, and subscribe. Ask me questions, follow me on my other socials, and again, get my free UX writing guide. This is going to help you streamline your learning process. Okay, so again, welcome. I am Sam, here to teach you about the most in-demand form of writing that is available. So this is really the overarching lesson plan for today's video, along with a just an image that I like, which I picked up from ClearLeft. The link is here, and I'll post a link to the slides in the description so that you can access this article should you choose to. So what is UX writing and why does it matter? I like this graphic because it basically breaks down why, for starters, empathy is so important, which is one of the key UX writing principles. And it basically discusses, how, depending on how your user feels, your microcopy, your UX writing, it needs to be tailored to how they feel based on the stage in the experience that they're in. And then it offers content examples, so how you would apply these. So just to visit the first example, the user feels happy, relieved, excited. Then the copy needs to be enthusiastic, positive, and passionate. Content examples for when they're likely to be happy, relieved, or excited. Success messages. marketing messages. There are, maybe if there is a, if your homepage is designed in a way that is meant to engage users quickly, it might be, a great opportunity to, make your copy something that is enthusiastic, positive, and passionate. If you are not sure how to do this with your brand voice, we will talk about it in a future video when I dissect and explain how to use, implement, complete a UX writing voice chart. So with that being said, let's talk more about each of these. So how UX more generally helps businesses make money. It improves user experience, enhances brand voice and identity, it drives conversions, and it reduces support costs. So if you can understand each of those, you don't, at this stage in the game, you don't have to understand what each of those means, but simply understanding the terminology, let's say, in terms of how UX helps businesses make money. This is going to get you started. This is going to get you on the right path. If you understand that, improving user experience is going to help increase the conversion rate of your website. That's how you increase the return on investment. So what that basically means is it's an idea of, starting with how the different ways in which UX helps empower businesses, and then basically using the different terms to drive your educational pursuits. So next up, key UX writing principles. So clarity, consistency, context, empathy, action focused. So again, I spoke about these in my previous video. I'll discuss them again with new examples in today's video, but I did just want to create space to kind of discuss each of these in a slide at the beginning of the video. So again, if you have any questions about these, I invite you to leave me a comment. So top 4 reasons, let's explore them in more detail before even getting more granular. So how UX writing helps businesses grow. I love this graphic right here because, so first I'll start by saying this is from Nielsen Norman Group, example of eye tracking pattern studies. So what I love about this is it shows basically eye tracking. What it means is this is where people's eyes go when they land on this web page. And generally speaking, this is what you'll find reproduced across just about any study on eye tracking patterns. It's that like the upper left, that's where the eye tends to be drawn in terms of like, sort of text heavy content like this, and understanding that it all cascades from, the title tag, the H1 tag of your site. And, that is important because if you understand how your users, generally speaking, engage, or just users more generally, engage with content online, then you can begin to tailor the specific content that you're designing for. Maybe it's a business's website, your personal website, an organization's website, or applications. You can begin to tailor it to the expectation that, people's eyes, their attention, their focus is going to move and fluctuate in a certain way. We can see that people pay a lot of attention to the headings that are on the page, H1, and then it looks like there's an H2 here, and then the bullet points, and then it kind of tapers off as we go further down the page. And generally speaking, that's what it is. It is very hard to keep and maintain people's attention online. I'm sure I probably don't have to tell you that, but it is just an important point to touch on. But let's dig into each of these in more detail. So the top 4 reasons. It improves user experience, enhances brand voice and identity, drives conversions, reduces support costs. So I've already said this a couple of times, but let's explore it in more detail. So as far as improving user experience is concerned, it increases user satisfaction and loyalty, and it reduces bounce rates and increases engagement. If you can improve the user experience of your site, what that is going to translate to is it's going to translate in the short term user satisfaction, and that sustaining user satisfaction in the short term, if you repeat that every time somebody visits your website, that's how you facilitate brand loyalty. Think about Netflix, for example. How often do you have a negative user experience or you leave Netflix dissatisfied? Honestly, maybe it's a lot, but let's just pretend, generally speaking, Netflix has pretty good user experience. You leave satisfied, likely, at least I do. And that for that reason, I return to it regularly. So that's one example of how user satisfaction translates to loyalty. It also reduces bounce rates and increases engagement. If you can satisfy the user, what that means is they're able to find what they're looking for. If I couldn't figure out how to, watch a movie on Netflix, I'm more likely to just close the application and not go back to it. So that would decrease engagement, for example. So now let's talk enhancing brand voice and identity. So building brand recognition and loyalty, and then increasing brand credibility and trust. So what this means is building recognition and loyalty through voice. If you can recognize, structuring your experience across multiple pages in such a way that has a cohesive, comprehensive, consistent voice, that is how you reinforce brand identity. It's how you develop it, and it's how you increase credibility and build trust in your user. We expect that sites like, apple.com, for example, that we trust those sites inherently. We trust the site. We're loyal to the brand, generally speaking, although this is not an endorsement of Apple by any stretch of the imagination. The point is simply that, via the enhancement of brand voice and identity, and the simple fact that you get those things from, visiting the website or engaging with Apple's various interfaces and products. It facilitates increased loyalty, increased trust, brand credibility, recognition, and that translates to success. That translates to dollars in. Also, driving conversion. So creating persuasive, effective, engaging messaging, guiding users through the user journey, and increasing conversion rates. So I'll talk about the user journey in more detail in an upcoming slide. User journey is a very, very important term to understand. Basically, how is a user getting from the initial screen they land on, say it's a home page, to the services page, to a specific service, to a form submission or a checkout, a purchase page, etc. So what does that user journey look like, be it for a website or application, and how are we moving somebody from they just landed on the site to the end result of they have purchased a product, signed up for something, that sort of thing. How are we moving them along? Reducing support costs. This is super important because, driving conversions, enhancing voice, improving user experience, all of those happen in the long term, let's say. And to some extent, support costs are similar, but really what support costs means, reducing support costs, what that means is like developing a brand voice, using UX writing, creating a questionnaire, distributing it, collecting data, research, and then creating a voice chart. What that means is you're effectively making it easier for teams to collaborate, whether it is a small, nonprofit organization or a small business or a large company. The UX writing documentation makes it easy for everybody to be on the same page. It facilitates faster decision making. I mentioned here enhancing collaboration with design and development teams, and then promoting a user-centric mindset throughout the business or organization. And what that does is it makes your onboarding process easier in terms of new hires, and it also makes conversations and decisions about digital products easier for teams and stakeholders to have. So now let's talk improving user experience in more detail. So like I said, increasing user satisfaction and loyalty, as well as reducing bounce rate and increasing engagement. So this is an example from Airbnb, and this was from an article titled 11 Amazing UX Design Examples to Learn From by Maze. The reason why I selected this is because I think Airbnb is so good at facilitating user engagement from the jump. You land on their home screen, you have this bar at the top for anybody who's ever visited Airbnb, their website. At least, you enter in a destination, dates you would want to visit, and if nothing else, even if you're not trying to book a trip, there is something that is very appealing about being able to scroll through different rental properties in popular vacation destinations. So they're so good at just getting somebody into that pipeline, so to speak. But let's talk about this in more detail. So improving content relevance and personalization. Content relevance and personalization, that is really what this image is all about. You can search a destination, you can enter the times that work best for you, and to that end, it is personalized to the user's immediate wants and needs. It's not like they're showing, as opposed to right here, we kind of have general categories of different rental properties. So outdoors instead of, being place specific, let's say, which, as a trying to break that down, it makes, if you're trying to improve the content relevance and personalization, you want to give the user access to a category rather than, a specific city. Whereas, more people are likely to click outdoor, the outdoor category than, say, if it was like a city or like San Francisco or, I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, let me know in the comments and I'll try to explain it in more detail. But it also, increasing user satisfaction and loyalty, it builds expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. So this is important because, again, if you want to continually bring users to your site and have them convert, you need to position yourself as an expert. You need to position yourself as an authority. And as, whether it's a person, a business, or an organization, you need to present as being trustworthy to your users. And as an aside, this is it's an acronym that's, EAT. That's what it's generally referred to as, EAT. And it's actually what search engines use to, determine ranking for different websites. So there's like this connecting thread between UX writing and search engine optimization that's really important. And the two are very connected for reasons I'll talk about in future videos. But in terms of reducing bounce rate and increasing engagement, bounce rate equals I read it right off the screen. Bounce rate is the percentage of site visitors who leave without engaging. So to revisit the Airbnb example, how does their UX writing reduce bounce rate? So we see, again, I'm going to return to this bar. Obviously, the graphics are really good and they make sense for what Airbnb does in terms of again, rental properties. But the whole design invites users to engage as quickly as possible. You can enter your destination in this little search bar. The red button is appealing, and then it says introducing 100+ upgrades across our entire service. So there are different ways that they're inviting users to engage with their product immediately on the home screen in the hero section. If you don't know what hero section is, a hero section is just the first section on a page, on a web page that you land on. So we don't have to do any scrolling to engage with Airbnb. And it's important because, bounce rate is something that if you're working in the digital world, you're constantly trying to figure out how to decrease bounce rate, how to engage more users, how to get them, again, from, if we talk about user journey, from somebody who's just landed on the site to somebody who is, in Airbnb's case, renting a property. Encourage the user's emotional connection to the product or experience. So how do you do this? I think the way that Airbnb does it is they have this great graphic that is engaging, that it is eye-catching, and they also, again, this bar, I know I keep returning to it, but it's presented right over this really engaging graphic in a way that is appealing to the user. And I think even if it's not triggering an emotional connection, I think it does prompt the user to begin this search. And beyond that, we see different images and icons and a micro copy used throughout the homepage. So explore nearby and live anywhere. It does kind of create this emotionally engaging response, at least for me. The idea that you can explore anywhere and you can live anywhere. It's exciting. And I think it is one of the many reasons why Airbnb is so successful. This isn't like an endorsement of Airbnb. We're just trying to analyze why the words work, why their website works. So on to the next. Enhance brand voice and identity. So brand voice, brand identity. The two images I have here, This is from the same Maze article that I mentioned on the last slide. The subsection is titled Duolingo's Gamified Experience. I've mentioned Duolingo in other videos. I like Duolingo. I don't use it all that often. I'm not really convinced that it works as well as it says it does. That's an aside, but one thing Duolingo is very good at is gamifying the experience of learning. And if we look at the different but the different points in their experience of their application, I won't dig into detail about what each one of these does, but the design is really good. It's simple, it's clean, it's engaging, it's cute. I love the little bird. I love the characters, the badges that they award, how they communicate that you're on a one-day learning streak. And this is kind of built around its UX design, but it's also UX writing. The two are very connected, and I could spend hours talking about why this is good and why just between these 5 images, we can understand what it means to gamify an experience. And I think that different businesses, organizations, they can gamify their websites and their applications. But a lot of times it doesn't happen because it isn't the easiest process to undergo. You have to have a good idea of brand voice and brand identity, and you have to figure out how to communicate both of those through your content. So Duolingo is fun. It might not always be fun, but in terms of like the different kinds of learning that's available to you online, in terms of like applications, I think Duolingo is a front runner for sure. And that's definitely because they're great at communicating their brand voice and their brand identity via UX writing and UX design. But let's dig into this. So brand voice is tone, its style, its personality of messaging. And if we try to discuss like what makes voice different from tone, that's, a rabbit hole that as a writer myself, I could talk about that for hours. I will spare you the details. If you have questions right now, feel free to leave me a comment and I'll address them. This is going to be something that we talk about in greater detail when, during this free course, we get to the UX writing voice chart. Beyond that, consistent messaging across platforms. And if not platforms, in terms of, how is LinkedIn aligning, how's the way the brand is communicating on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, etc., similar to how, the website is, the voice on the website is working and on the application it's working. It really depends on having a clearly defined structure, and that is going to bring us to the voice chart, which again, I'll talk about in an upcoming video. So persuasive messaging facilitates engagement. If you're not able to consistently communicate your brand through your brand voice, it's going to be very difficult to, put to screen the sort of persuasive messaging that engagement effectively requires. On the topic of brand identity is the visual and verbal representation of a brand. So to revisit the Duolingo example, one of the reasons why Duolingo is so successful, why the app has so many downloads, is because it does have a great user experience. The visual and verbal elements are aligned with one another. The visuals are very fun. The verbal is exciting and engaging and also fun. Practice complete. Scholar achievement leveled up. The different ways in which they engage users visually and verbally are calculated, and it communicates the identity of a sort of fun environment for learning. Also, unique brand personality fosters a memorable impression. And what is the best thing you can do with an application? What does every company that has an app want you to do with their app? They want you to use it regularly. So if we look at the second image for Duolingo, it says 1 day streak. So, and then let's revisit this point. Unique brand personality fosters a memorable impression. How do we keep users coming back? We need to clearly communicate our brand identity so that our experience is sticking around in the user's memory. There's also company values that demonstrate inclusivity and accessibility. Whether or not the idea of inclusivity is being communicated upfront in Duolingo's interface in their, in their experience. That's kind of an aside. I really want to focus on accessibility right now because this is about as accessible as it gets. There's very simple words, short, sweet, to the point, and it's not too text heavy. They rely on images a lot. They put, a special emphasis on the visual and use the verbal to kind of supplement that, what it is that the visual is working toward. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, if you have questions, leave me a comment. I'm happy to answer them. How UX writing helps businesses grow. So it drives conversions. Again, this is something, I've talked about in a number of different ways throughout several different videos, but creating persuasive and effective messaging and then guiding users through the user journey in order to increase conversion. So I like both of these graphics. The first one is an SEO sales landing page template from Venage. I think it's an agency. But we don't have to get too far, too into the weeds on this or into the specifics. But if we just look at how this page is organized, it's very clean. The headings jump off the page. The fonts are appealing. Their use of color and how they supplement, again, the visual with the verbal is super, super important because, it's not too text heavy, it's skimmable, it's readable, and that makes it accessible and inclusive. And, accessibility and inclusivity, again, I've talked about this in other videos, but those are so, so important because if you can make your experience inclusive and accessible, that's how you access the largest market possible. If your content isn't accessible, you're effectively limiting the number of users who can, convert in the way that you want them to convert. And in that way, on the subject of creating persuasive and effective messaging, you're honoring your users' time. This is, kind of it's in line with what I've spoken about in terms of empathy and why empathy is so important. If you can grab and maintain, if you're working to grab and maintain the user's attention, you're being respectful of their time. You're understanding that everybody's busy. Nobody wants to necessarily give a great amount of time to scrolling through a website. So UX writing is a way that it helps businesses grow insofar that it helps facilitate user engagement, maintain user engagement, grab their attention from the beginning, and, in doing all of those things, addressing their pain points such that they can get what they want out of the experience that they have been delivered to. And then obviously, I've kind of touched on this already, but communicating the value proposition and key benefits. Don't waste the user's time. That's why UX writing is so important. It places a special emphasis on, again, empathizing with the user, figuring out what their pain points are, identifying and communicating solutions to them, and then basically, testing, retesting, optimizing as necessary so that that value proposition is communicated, benefits are communicated in a way that is fun, and to reuse the word that I mentioned on the previous slide, gamify a digital experience. In terms of guiding users through the user journey and increasing conversions, reducing friction. If you understand what the primary purpose that UX writing can serve is reducing friction, basically ensuring that somebody can move from one part of the experience, one part of the user journey to the next and the next and the next so that they can, again, make it to the bottom of that sales funnel. You're trying to remove as many obstacles as possible in order to facilitate, basically the achievement of the user's goals as well as the achievement of a business's or organization's goals. And this basically comes down to clear calls to action. Are you facilitating or preventing engagement? Can the user figure out how they get what they want when they want it? To revisit the Duolingo example, a single button. I won't zoom in and read through each of these calls to action, but each page in the application's experience just about, it's not, there's no confusion about what I need to do, what I need to click to get to the next part in the experience. And that's important because if it isn't clear, your user is going to get lost. They're going to, break from the experience, and then you start getting into a place where, you're not increasing trust or loyalty. You're, doing quite the opposite. The image down here is awareness, consideration, and decision. How to convert at each stage, from SNOV, which I think is another agency. But I like this because it effectively shows, why UX writing, why a voice chart, for instance, is so important. Because, if we're moving a user from awareness to interest to consideration to evaluation, decision, purpose, can't even read that, repeat, loyalty, advocacy, we're trying to move them through all of these stages so that they are, we're increasing the lifetime value of a customer, and we're also just ensuring that their pain points are being addressed when they visit a website or an application. Writing is important at every stage, at every point in this process of making money online. In order to get the conversion outcome that we want, we need to, at every step, ensure that our, the voice we're using, the words that we're choosing, the calls to action that are being selected are consistent, that they are contextualized in the larger experience. And in order to do that, you need to be close. You need to get very close to the content that you're presenting to your user. And that's where UX writers come in, and that's how they work to, the phrase I like using is optimizing these sales funnels for businesses, organizations, people, etc. Reducing support costs. Let's dig into this. So, return on investment, the $1 trillion UX problem. This is from Career Foundry. I really like this article. What it basically says is, on average, for every $1 that is invested in UX writing, $100 is returned. And that's because, in the short-term investment in UX writing might be a little hefty, or just UX, design, research, etc., more generally. In the short term, it might be costly, but in the long term, what it translates to is a better experience that is going to increase conversion rates and ensure that users' pain points are addressed so that they're reaching the end of the user journey, where they're effectively purchasing a product or converting in a way that's beneficial to a business or organization. So let's look at this graphic as well, the benefits of the UX design process. So 2 times faster time to market. Overall development is accelerated. 75% reduced time and cost. So spending less time in the design process. When you have, granted this is design, but like I said previously, UX design and UX writing are very closely connected. And then beyond that, 50% reduction in design defects. So having a process to pass through, which I'm going to talk about in a future video, my UX writing process in greater detail. But having a process to move through, to iterate through, it's going to be very helpful during the product development lifecycle. Beyond that, it yields a 50% reduction in maintenance costs on average. And it does that because when you're very calculated in terms of the systems you use to create, revisiting, maintaining, testing, revising, it becomes much easier. Just speaking from experience, I can tell right away when I'm working with a client whether or not a website was designed, with some sort of system in place. Now, traditionally, this is, the design thinking process, which is, empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and, test. I can tell when somebody was abiding by a process that was either the design thinking process or something similar versus when they did not, because if there was no design process, things are all over the place. They're very messy. There are inconsistencies across the experience, and that is really, really going to increase maintenance costs. And the maintenance cost manifests in all kind of different ways, whether it is staffing in terms of the number of hours it takes to maintain an experience month over month, year over year, or different software costs. Hosting, for example. If your website wasn't well planned, your site's running slower, you need to pay more for hosting. That's just a quick example of something that came to mind, but there are a number of other different examples I could touch on. And then a 300% return on UX design investment. So again, this is a different article from, it's from SNOV, and so we're not talking about averages here, but you do see the potential for at every turn you see the potential for an impressive return on investment, because you are getting very granular and very focused on, taking the right steps that improve your users' experience so that their pain points are being addressed and they're making it to the end of the user journey and converting. So to talk more about the specific bullet points, create clear and understandable content that answers user questions. Reduce confusion and misunderstandings that can lead to support requests. Ensure that the user, again, can just seamlessly, or to reuse a previous word, frictionlessly make it to the end of the experience, of the user journey. Then provide users with self-service resources to resolve their own issues. One of the benefits of having a UX writer is the idea that they can, they're empathizing with the user. They're thinking about content. They're thinking about how content is being perceived at every step in the user journey. And what that translates to is resolving issues before they effectively need to be resolved. I'll talk more about that in a future video in terms of like specific examples, but just for now, understand that, UX writers help offer self-service resources in an experience. Maybe it's like, a pop-up if somebody is inactive for a long time, or it's a chat bot feature that engages the user with a message in the event that, certain conditions are met, where they're kind of clicking around and not really, moving through the experience in a way that is seamless, let's say. Moving on, reducing the need for additional support or training, saving time and resources. So it reduces support staff, their workload that's required, and all the associated costs in terms of paying employees. If you have an experience that is clearly documented, was clearly planned, and has had somebody, spend time considering what are the needs of the ideal users who will be moving through this site, what are their needs, what that translates to is on the other side of the design and development process of an experience, be it a website, an application, or another digital product, it translates to lower maintenance costs, an easier workload for staff to interact with the product. Next is reducing training needs for new employees and customers. So I actually had this happen recently. I was working with the founder of a nonprofit. What she communicated to me was that as the nonprofit has grown, one of the problems that they are increasingly finding is that their onboarding time is negatively affected in a big way by the fact that they struggle to bring employees up to speed on what their voice is, what their brand voice is, and how they communicate their, the voice of their brand as well as their brand's value proposition across different platforms. And you can imagine that for nonprofits that rely in large part on donations, you don't really have room to have increasing support costs, increasing training needs, month over month, quarter over quarter, etc. So reducing training needs for new employees and customers is one of the ways in which UX writing helps businesses grow. If you have the documentation that, a voice chart, for example, and, various like tangentially related documentation, if you have that available, you pass it off to a new hire. You say, this is what our voice is, especially with like recent evolutions in how everyday people are able to engage with artificial intelligence. The writing process can be streamlined for new employees who might not have a crystallized understanding of the brand voice, for example. On to the next slide. So I love this example. So it's from an article by User Guiding, 9 great examples of good user experience. So this is Google, what Google.com looks like in 1998 versus, 2021, 22, 23. But let's talk about key UX writing principles. Again, I spoke about these in my previous video, but they're clarity, consistency, context, empathy, and action oriented. Those are the 5 key UX writing principles, and they help businesses grow because, if your writing is clear, consistent, contextualized, empathetic toward users, and action oriented, it's going to facilitate the user's movement through the user journey. So just to talk about Google's example, you know, what are some inhibitors? You know, why has the experience changed over the years? Why does the experience no longer look like this and now typically just looks like the blank search bar? It's because, everything else is effectively a distraction. Making the experience as accessible as possible to users depends in large part on just getting them to use their search function. That's what Google wants. And so to that end, granted, we see a number of different stylistic changes between the two experiences, but the commonality is the search function. Obviously, Google's name as well, but really trying to just ensure, make it as simple as possible for the user to engage with the experience and get what they want out of it. Google has thousands of employees. Their team of UX writers, I'm sure, understand that users' pain points, their primary pain point, I would assume when they come to google.com is they're looking for something. They are trying to find something. They're trying to use the search engine. So for that reason, we're just going to put the search bar in front of them and let the rest play out. None of the special searches, if they need help, they can find it in a different way. So really just making it as simple as possible. But clarity, one way to think about what clarity is, where are your eyes being drawn? Is it clear? And to that end, it's either clear or unclear how you're supposed to use the experience. So where are my eyes drawn when I look at the new Google interface? Obviously the logo is colored, but the search bar, far and away, that's what I'm looking at. Whereas previously it was, we also have like different coloring that's on the bottom that doesn't have a great contrast ratio. So just the reduction in the number of things that are on the screen, the number of different elements that are on the screen improves the clarity of the experience. So, and basically another thing that clarity comes down to is can the experience be immediately understood? Can the user understand where they are, what they should do in order to get what they want? And with the second one, definitely. I think it's very intuitive. We have the little magnifying glass icon, the microphone feature for voice users, and the Google search button. In terms of consistency, the intuition, how does it feel? Color, font, typography, design, images. The first feels very inconsistent, very 1990s, early 2000s, kind of messy, again, poor contrast ratio, like colors wise, font wise, etc. Whereas the new experience is like, it's clean. I think it feels clean. It feels simple. And to that end, it facilitates, greater user engagement. Context. Again, I kind of spoke a little bit about this when I was talking about clarity, but can you intuit your location in the experience? Is your destination nearby? I'm on google.com. I want to, I want to figure out, I'm searching for something. I'm searching for coffee grounds. I can basically intuit what I have to do to get to where I need to go. Now, maybe not everybody on the entire planet is going to, respond to this webpage in the same way. Maybe, I don't doubt that there are people who have never heard of Google, but generally speaking, that this is all that's really required to ensure that the user can engage with the experience in a way that is going to facilitate the ideal conversion for the business, as well as the answer to the user's problem on their end. So empathy-wise, where's the friction? And then how do the visual elements cater to the users? If we look at the first Google experience, where's the friction? It's in everything underneath the search bar that is not, just getting the user to engage. It's special searches, it's help, it's about Google, it's company info, it's Google logos. I think, it says it's Google logos. It's sign up for, monthly updates, all of that can fall by the wayside and isn't even really addressing users' pain points or their most likely pain points, is creating friction in the experience. And then, how do the visual elements cater to the user? Again, the idea of friction. The most recent experience, the one with the green check mark next to it, how do the visual elements cater to the user? There's effectively one, visual element on the page, and that is the search bar. Beyond their logo, beyond the buttons, the search bar. That's where the eye goes. That's what you're looking at. And to that end, it's making it very easy for the user to engage. And on that note, in terms of user engagement, there's action orientation. So what task is the experience helping a user complete, and how is user engagement being facilitated? Kind of already touched on both of those, but the task is the idea that Google is trying to make it as easy as possible for users who have arrived on Google to, type in their search and to end up, on a search engine results page where they can then find their answer. And to that end, user engagement is being facilitated. Clarity, consistency, context, empathy, action orientation. If you have questions, again, comments, let me know. So thank you so much for watching. That's everything I have for today. I invite you to subscribe to my channel, follow me on my other socials, LinkedIn, Twitter, visit my website, samleary.com, to download my free ebook, my free UX writing guide. So I want to thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments, and I will see you next time.